Hello, everyone. Let's talk about the Senate races and who will take back the upper chamber in this election cycle. Let's start with which states are safely in the Democratic column. Now, let's look at Washington, California, New Mexico, Hawaii, Maryland. Actually, we will not put Maryland in the safe column, and we'll talk about Maryland in a second. Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and the state of Vermont. The solid Republican. Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, North Dakota, Wyoming, and the state of Utah, as well as both of Nebraska's seats. And people have been discussing the possibility of Nebraska being a little bit closer, but there's no shot, especially in a presidential election year, of Nebraska's Senate seat going to the Democratic Party. It may be a likely margin that Republicans win these seats, but it is unlikely. So here, this map is extremely favorable towards Republicans. They just have to carry 3 more states to win the election. Now let's talk about likely Democratic margins. We'll go to Minnesota. Even if Trump makes the state close, the Senate candidate is likely to lose. The state of Virginia, Hung Cao, has consistently performed worse in the polls than Donald Trump, and Trump is unlikely to carry the state of Virginia. Hung Cao is unlikely to carry it. Maryland, there had been polls showing Governor Larry Hogan up in the state, but that seems to not be the case anymore. Maine, this one is going to be close simply because of the presidential race, but the Democrat incumbent is going to hold on. Next, let's talk about likely Republicans. Florida. This state might be won by Donald Trump by 9 points, and Rick Scott isn't far behind in the polls. Montana, even though people have been speculating this as a closer race, it is extremely unlikely that that Jon Tester will hold on in this race. As you see in the aggregate, Sheehy is up 7 points, and Donald Trump is going to win the state by perhaps 20 points, so it's unlikely that Tester is going to be able to pull something out of this race. If he does, that would be a miracle for Democrats, but that is very unlikely. And that is all for our likely Republican states. As we see here, Republicans have hit 50 on the Senate map. Now, let's go to the lean Democratic column. We'll go to the state of Arizona. In the polls, Gallego is leading by 6. Now, of course, this is margin not going to hold on Election Day with Donald Trump on the ballot. Most definitely, we could see it get very closer, but if ticket splitting is as much as polls suggest, then Kari Lake will probably get over the finish line if Donald Trump wins the state. And this is odd. This election is odd for Senate races because we see a lot of these states which are much more Trump favorable in the Electoral College being favorable towards Democrats in the Senate race, which is considerably odd since ticket splitting in the modern era is almost non-existent. Now, some of these states are going to be more favorable for Republicans, and we'll see in a second. But in Arizona, we're going to say Gallego wins just by a lean margin. The state of Nevada. This state in the aggregate is not very competitive. Rosen has a 5.3 margin, which is a likely margin. Now, again, if Donald Trump carries the state, will we see this amount of ticket splitting? I doubt it, and we might see maybe a 3-point difference between Trump and the Republican, or 2 to 3 points, and that would probably be enough for Rosen to hold on against Brown. And that is all for our lean Democratic states. And so if you see here, we are in an interesting spot. Texas is going to be lean Republican, simply because Trump's going to win this state decisively, and in the polls, there has been not a single one which has had all red winning in the aggregate. It's 4.2 for Cruz, and the worst poll for Cruz is a Cruz +1. it is unlikely that Allred is going to overperform these polls, especially with Trump on the ballot. So we will give Texas a lean Republican margin. Next will be Ohio. And Ohio, Brown is actually leading the polls, but not enough in the state that's likely to vote for Donald Trump, upwards of 10 points. There will not be enough ticket splitting to get Brown across the finish line. Is it possible? Yes. But it's going to be extremely tough for Brown to hold on against Moreno. Even though Moreno isn't exactly the best candidate for Ohio, it's going to be extremely tough for Brown to hold on in this race. Finally, we shall go to our tilt margins, and we are going to say that Michigan will tilt towards Slotkin. And this is going to be a state that is probably going to vote the most Democratic out of these three, and in the presidential election, and likely, if there's any ticket splitting, it will benefit the Democrat Slotkin in a much more effective way. But that is the last of the tilt Ds. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania will be tilt R, simply because Wisconsin is going to be Donald Trump's best state in that sort of Rust Belt area, and it's unlikely that ticket splitting is going to be 4 or more points. I expect Donald Trump to win the state of Wisconsin by 3 or more, and it's unlikely that Baldwin will have this edge come election time. And considering the state of Pennsylvania, polls have started to show a closer and closer race, with McCormick even up one in Atlas Intel's recent poll. And I expect this one to be Donald Trump's second most favorable state. So ticket splitting should not be that much of a factor. And these polls in these states are quite odd. Ticket splitting might be relegated to something like 2 points. The only real example of ticket splitting was in the 2020. The only real example of ticket splitting in the modern era was the 2020 U.S. Senate race in the state of Maine, where Joe Biden won the state by 7 in the presidential, but Susan Collins won it by almost 10 whole points, which is an extremely bipolar result. And that's the most extreme ticket splitting you see, but maybe one of these does that. Maybe we could see something like a Nevada or an Arizona vote that way. But for these closer states, I highly doubt people are gonna ticket split that much, especially in this election. So as we see here, 54 seats for Republicans and 46 for Democrats. This race is a very, very close one, and these three states could go pretty much either way. But Republicans have a very good chance of winning the Senate in this election, and simply because these Senate seats have gone through perhaps the easiest for Democrats to hold on. The first, it was 2006. Most of them got elected in a year that was very favorable for Democrats. Next, 2012, when they were able to ride off Obama's coattails. And 2018, another midterm year that was extremely beneficial for Democrats. Now you have 2024, when a Republican is on the ballot, a popular, and he is going to do better in the Electoral College, and with the most bad environment for the Democratic Party, with inflation and cost of living on the rise, this will be a hard race for Democrats to keep the Senate. But this is the prediction. We have less than 2 weeks, so 1 week and 6 days till Election Day, and I hope you all have a great day. Leave any comments and suggestions below. If you disagree with anything, please let me know. Thank you all.